Welcome to the Business of Defense, and thanks for joining us. I'm Rich Brady, your host and CEO of the American Society of Military Comptrollers. ASMC proudly sponsors this podcast on Federal News Network. ASMC is the premier educational and professional nonprofit association that helps to bridge the gap between the boardroom and the battlefield while supporting transformation in the defense financial management sector. My guest today is Salome Tinker, partner of TSC Enterprise. TSC is a certified public accounting and management consulting firm with expertise in all areas of accounting, auditing, tax, payroll, financial staffing, and more. Operating for nearly 2 decades as a minority-owned small business, TSC has been fortunate enough to have Salome as part of the team from the beginning. TSC's tagline is, "We solve problems," and I'm anxious to have Salome share some examples of solutions here today. Salome, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Rich. Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. So let's go back to the beginning. As I mentioned, TSC's been around about 20 years. Can you take us back to the beginning and what's the origin? How did TSC come together?
TSC is a partnership between my husband and I, Chris Tinker. And after we passed the CPA exam, we said then, let's rise to the pinnacle of this profession. Let's form our own CPA firm. So we originally started as a small mom and pop accounting and tax advisory firm.
Okay, so you were doing tax advisory work. Was it primarily for individuals or small businesses?
Small businesses, the community. We were community-based, serving, the greater DC area.
All right. And then how did that then transform into the federal space? Was there a jump between the personal and the small business to state, local, and then federal, or talk a little bit about that transformation?
Yeah, in 2017, well, I was I guess a quasi partner. It was more so my husband who was the managing partner. And in 2017, I guess I hit a pinnacle and said, I'm getting old and I'm working with all of these people. I was at the AICPA, working with a lot of partners in the big 4 firms. I said, if there's now a time to jump, let me come in and try to grow the federal sector practice. So 2017, I left the AICPA and came in to do just that.
And talk about, was it a difficult transition from, again, doing kind of individual taxes, doing, that type of work, and then going into federal work? I mean, the foundation is probably the same, the standards and accounting and everything, but it's much different work on a day-to-day basis.
It was difficult because, again, my entire, I guess for a couple of short stints at the Federal Reserve Board, but my entire career was around corporate accounting, corporate audit. And so coming in, it really was a retooling of understanding from the overarching concepts and standards. They're the same, but there are some nuances in the federal space that I had to learn. So it was just very diligent and just trying to get out there and absorb as much information as I could so that our firm could grow.
Yeah, you mentioned just before coming in this morning you were meeting with a client. So what's your 30-second pitch? You get to sit down, or you get a few minutes with a potential federal client. What's your pitch? How do you sell TSC?
Our pitch is, as you mentioned earlier, is just we simply solve problems. I use our corporate experience to our federal experience and try to come up with a solution, leveraging our partners when needed. To just make sure that we can bring fresh new ideas to the forefront to kind of get to the most complex problems. Now,
your partnerships with other firms, are you primarily acting as a prime contractor or a sub to another prime?
Ironically, when I left and came into federal practice, it's very hard for a firm that doesn't have prior federal experience to kind of crack that code. So I leveraged all of the experience that I had over the years as a policy writer for the AICPA and the Federal Reserve, understanding the standards, understanding, what the accounting rules were, and just buckle down. And ironically, I have not subbed a contract yet. I'm looking forward to that opportunity, but we have been fortunate to win all prime work in the federal space.
Well, that sounds like that's an anomaly. From what I hear, most start out doing sub work and eventually graduate up to doing prime, but it sounds like you've done just the opposite.
I did just the opposite, and so our strategic goal in this coming year and future is to try to now go back and get more relationships with our large companies to kind of partner. We are in a staffing crisis. Everyone's feeling it. And so there's a good rationale now to kind of, for everyone to collaborate to get the mission accomplished.
Right. Now, I definitely want to come back. We'll come back to the talent management piece. I know we've got a lot to talk about there. But I want to talk about your business structure a little bit. You're a service-disabled veteran-owned small business, I think an economically disadvantaged women-owned small business, and in the state of Maryland, a minority disadvantaged small business. So can you describe those a little bit? What are those? What's the differences of those? And ultimately, what we want to get to is, what advantages do those give you as a small business?
Well, ultimately, we are just a disadvantaged business in several socioeconomic categories. Certainly, I served, and my husband served, but I retired as an Army enlisted, and so that offered me, when you do 20 years, you get some kind of residual effects coming out of the military. So that offered me the opportunity to be a service-disabled veteran-owned small business. Certainly, if you look at me, I'm a woman, so you get what you get with that. And then again, Maryland is fortunate under the Department of Transportation to offer disadvantaged businesses as well as minority business enterprises, so that the playing field could be leveled out, if you will. In the Maryland, it's a little bit easier to get to use those categories. The state of Maryland allows a 15 to 30% automatic competition goal that must be met, and so from the perspective of there's a service-disabled veteran piece there, we certainly can provide that support. We don't like to lead with our socioeconomic categories because certainly we think we are, that should not be the leader, but to the extent, we can serve in that capacity, we're certainly willing and able to do so.
So it sounds like you also, in addition to having some federal work, you've got a fair amount of state, local, or municipal work as well.
Yeah.
Is that right?
Yes.
And does that help? Do you see that as an advantage, maybe through spreading the risk out a little bit in your revenue streams? You get a couple state, local contracts as well as the federal. Absolutely,
absolutely. One of my subject matter expertise at the CPA was in risk and internal control, and so certainly as you spread out your touch points, you can manage your risk that well. And I will say to the state, it allowed me the opportunity because the barrier of entry into business was so low. It allowed the past performance, and then, to your point, I could not get subcontract work. But since I had this past performance in the state, it allowed me to then present that forward and get the prime work.
Now, are there drawbacks to being affiliated with some of these categories? I mean, when it comes to your growth or how fast you're able to grow or contracts you can go after?
Well, it's still very difficult to get work under those socioeconomic categories. I think I've been doing this for 7 years, and I just won my first service-disabled veteran-owned contract. So it's not like it's a given that it comes to you. I've never won a woman-owned small business contract. So, but certainly it's a tool there to leverage that, however I can get into the door, this is how you can reach me.
Right. So then going from here, what is your growth strategy? I mean, it sounds like, again, you've got some federal work, you've got the state local work. Where are you looking to grow in the future? Is it more on that state local side or more on the federal side?
More on the federal side. Again, my strategic plan is to leverage our past performance. I think when I first started, I went to one Big Four company and I was like, hey, can you help me out? And they were like, who are you? And so they kicked me out and said, well, come back when you get, I guess 10 or 20 employees. And so now I'm coming back and saying, hey, you told me to come back, here I am. So our growth is to get into defense. You do 20 years in the military, it's kind of like you need to be in defense. My whole life is about defense. So. So trying to get in there, leveraging our civilian agency work to come into that, working with partners who are actively doing it, and just trying to demonstrate and get out there to promote our business to say we can support as well.
And who are your other federal partners that you're working with?
Yes, we've done work with the Small Business Administration, the Federal Transit, the Federal Aviation Administration, National Science Foundation, Corporation for National Community Service, and we actually have a small contract with West Point.
Okay, that sounds like a pretty good track record
Yeah.
you've got there. And so the next step is getting into probably larger, bigger defense contracts.
Absolutely.
But it sounds like the strategy is to come in as a sub
Right.
on a larger. And are you finding now that some of the bigs are looking for teaming partners in these areas? Because I mean, we're going to get back to this talent management discussion, but they're having talent management challenges as well. And so as much as they can team up with partners who have individuals with the skill sets that they need. Sounds like they're trying to leverage those.
Well, we sure hope so. As you indicated, it's not going away. It doesn't seem to be going away anytime soon. And so at the end of the day, as the Army girl, you got to get the mission done. And so maybe this creates opportunities for firms that, would not necessarily be considered now.
Right. Any unique challenges that you've seen in the federal sector, as you entered into it, that you've been able to overcome, and you're looking at not being challenges in the future as you get into larger defense work?
Each agency has got its own nuances,
Yeah.
and so just trying to understand, again, I always go back to the mission. If you understand the mission, and you bring that solution, then someone will listen, right? Because ultimately it's all about the mission.
Right.
So that's what we try to keep. Well, that's what I try to keep our firm's eye on, is looking at the mission. How can we penetrate that?
Yeah, it's interesting you say that. We were just talking about that this morning as well, that within defense, each of the military services has its own culture, and within federal government, each agency has its own culture. And learning that is really half the battle. Once you figure that out, you figure out how they operate, then you can help solve their problems, their challenges.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Right. Salome, you mentioned that you served in the military. Can you talk a little bit about your military service?
Ironically, I served 20 years as an Army nurse. I switched over to accounting after getting injured. It was during the time when AIDS was rampant, and I accidentally got stuck with a needle. And so I said, I can't do this. So numbers have always been my thing. So I switched over, went to school at night while I was working at Walter Reed here in D.C. in the daytime. And so fortunate to get an intern with Deloitte, and then that started my CPA career.
Oh, that's fantastic. Given that military background, and it's interesting, you made the transition from nurse to accounting, financial management, CPA. How do you think that helps you, with that background, understanding your customers' needs or their requirements?
The medical field and consulting is very similar. Someone comes into the hospital, you don't know what's wrong with them. You have to, kind of do a diagnostics or, a triage to figure out what the problem is. And so I've taken those tools and leveraged them over in the business sector to kind of, again, do a diagnostic, figure out what's the problem so that we can offer the best solution.
Now, how does that also affect the culture you're trying to develop within TSC?
Our culture is simply that we're family. If we care as much as about our customers as we care about our family, then everybody will be served.
Right. And we mentioned in the beginning you're a minority-owned small business, and I want to make sure we talk about, let's dive right and talk about diversity, equity, inclusion, and your thoughts on that, and what you see in the federal space, this consulting space, and within your own company, and in the finance accounting profession.
Sure. Currently, as of date, only 3% of all CPAs are minority in the socioeconomic classification of Black. So within that, there's no statistics that currently talk about how many firms are African American. And so when you're looking at the space, I think there's an opportunity to leverage and to help. Diversity and inclusion always is focused on getting the employee to the next step. And we thank you for getting us, at least me and Deloitte, for allowing me the opportunity to learn the craft. But now I've grown up, if you will. Yeah. I have a firm, and so I would love to see some of that same effort trying to help the incoming student as to also help the minority firm to grow and learn.
Why do you think the numbers are so low to begin with? That 3% that are coming out of academia and even getting into the profession. Why do you think? Is it influencers? Is it just a lack of awareness of the opportunities? Maybe.
I think at inception, African Americans came into the profession with open arms around the 80s. So I think it's just a catch-up. I think we're kind of like the first or second generation who have even made it to to a substantial partner level to then go out and do your own thing. So it's just a matter of just catching up.
Right.
But overall, outside of minorities, the profession in general has taken a huge decline. And I do think it's about trying to get the word out, we need to do a better job of advertising our profession.
And I know on that point, you're going to be hosting an event along with the National Association of Black Accountants next month, and I'm fortunate you've invited ASMC to be part of that. Can you talk a little bit about that event and what you're hoping to get out of that? Yeah,
from the federal procurement side, I think the Office of the White House issued a report that says that in federal procurement, only 2.7 of all small firms are black. And so now you're cutting a slice of specifically looking in the finance and accounting space. Well, how many firms are there in this type of, in our field? And so what we were trying to do is just, again, to bring some outreach to show there are a lot of firms out there that have a very substantial accounting practice, maybe in the state space or in their local municipalities, 20 to 30 employees that they have that may be able to leverage this federal space. And so it's more of awareness to say, hey, if you didn't know we were out here, certainly this is an opportunity for both of us to collaborate. Again, at the end of the day, we're trying to get the mission done. Everybody is having a staffing shortage. And so if we can just introduce ourselves and to let firms know we're out here, then maybe there could be a breakthrough of collaboration.
And what are you doing to try to recruit more minority CPAs? Are there certain efforts that you're undertaking, either in schools or with other firms to bring them on board?
Yes, within the National Association of Black Accountants, there's a subgroup of diverse organizational firms, and that's representing the firm aspect of the association. We have relationships with Becker, where we're going into historically underserved colleges and trying to get to the core of the students where they lie, even reaching back as far as high school, because nowadays there's so many things. We're competing with. You could just wake up and turn a camera on and sell some deodorant and make money. So who wants to be an accountant when you can be an influencer? Right. And so there's so many things that, that's driving kids out of college. You can be IT, learn how to code. I mean, some of the coders don't need degrees. And just trying to develop a marketing effort to go and reach those. And I think that's across the board, not necessarily from the minority space, but also I think the larger firms are also doing the same thing.
No, you're absolutely right. I think that the accounting finance profession, there is an issue with the narrative behind what we do. A lot of people think it's just tax and audit. You go on site, you pull samples for a couple of weeks, and you go back and write a report, and then you go back out and you pull samples again. It is much more dynamic than that these days, and it's much more tech related. Yeah. And I'm not sure that the profession has done a good job explaining that to the early careerists or the men and women who are in college to understand all the possibilities in this. What any specific recommendations that you would have for government, academia, or even associations on how we can help support these efforts?
Yeah, we certainly have to, again, just more programming, going out and maybe, as we do, we go into the classroom and give our presentations to say, hey, we're a minority firm. This is what we do. This is exciting. We got to put the excitement back into into it, and just again, just provide. I think the first person who reached the the child gets the child, if you will. And so to the extent we can, even going back as middle school, teaching them about the budget and finance, right? Just getting them excited about, the whole aspects of that. And then also leveraging our technology. We have artificial intelligence right now. And so getting them to understand, you can go in and design a program that will help, over risk management, put a bot in robotics process automation or something. So you can, there are ways that we can make it, I call it sound sexy.
Right. Well, yeah, the Chat GPT-4 passed the uniform CPA exam just a few months ago, and I hope that doesn't send the wrong message, like we don't need accounting and finance professionals anymore because we're going to have AI that does that for us. I like to say it's augmented intelligence, not artificial, that you're still going to need a human in the loop, understanding the output from that.
And I think that's a challenge in our field as well as fields across the board. Will it replace us? But again, it's just a retooling of thought, right? So while it will make our work efficient, then maybe the person who, to your point, you got to have a touch point in it. ChatGPT lies, but so you need a touch point to do the reasonableness test, right? And then also garbage in is garbage out. So again, that thought process to kind of put those position points in to come out with the best solution.
Now, this whole discussion it comes down to you've reached the point where you become a mentor for a lot of people in the community. Who are your mentors? Who helped you get to where you are today?
It was very dark when I started because, as I said, nobody wanted to let me in, and so the tunnel was dark. So I did find some lights at the end of the tunnel, and I just kept following the lights. Creative Business Solutions is a joint venture mentor through an SBA partnership. IFAS, Tabitha Turman, who also was a light at the end of the tunnel, as well as I have mentors like Bill Hughes at Cone Resnick that I look to and support. Paul Leonkas at Cotton. So, again, leveraging these relationships, because at the end of the day, people do business who they know, like, and trust. And so again, when I took a step back and did a self-evaluation, I said, well, you know what, these people don't know me. Why would they give me anything? And so, again, just trying to show, demonstrate our work ethic and demonstrate, that we're in it, as a team, as a viable solution. And at the end of the day, it's about, again, serving the customer. And so that's what we try to do.
So what last piece of advice would you give for a young man or woman, minority, who was thinking about, coming into this line of work?
Right, federal procurement, and like any other thing, you got to put in the work. You can't just wake up and say, I want to own a firm, and and can you give me, a contract? No, it doesn't work like that. You got to put in the work. It's like anything else. You have to study the craft, right? If you want to get into an agency, you need to study the agency. If you want to get into a company, you need to study the company. You need to find a penetration point. And it might not be, they say, sometimes the relationship might need to grow, up to 18, 24 months, but don't give up. And just keep your head down and just keep driving.
Sound advice for anybody in business.
Yep.
I'd like to thank today's guest, Salome Tinker, partner at TSC Enterprise, for her insights on TSC's strategy, competition, and talent management, and also some of the challenges she and her team have been confronted with as a minority-owned small business. Watch The Business of Defense next month, where we bring you inside the companies working to drive change in the defense sector, to hear directly from their business leaders and to understand how they create value for their companies and their customers. And check out ASMC's website at asmconline.org, where you can find more information on upcoming events and programs, including discussions on PPBE reform, our data analytics and decision support virtual conference, and our update to the Certified Defense Financial Manager certification. I am Rich Brady, CEO of the American Society of Military Comptrollers. You are listening to Federal News Network. For more on this discussion, visit federalnewsnetwork.com and search ASMC.